Man, it's nice to be back to the Chicago South Shore Freight Kingsbury Branch. After not making any videos on this for a while, I'm glad to finally be talking about the orange Jeeps once again and getting away from the disgusting, monotonous, Jevo-ridden Class 1s. And just as unexpectedly as this video came out, so did the train on October 6th. I was coming home and it just jump-scared me at a random crossing. Yeah. So I don't have my camcorder, so sorry for the crappy footage. Anyways, it was just two regular orange Jeeps with only a single grain hopper. And guess what? On October 29th, I was going into Stillwell, passed over a random crossing, and look who decided to show up. But thankfully for me, I happened to have my camcorder with me on this day, so I was able to nab a very nice shot of the train. It was Longhood Ford with 2007 leading and 2000 trailing. As they usually do at this crossing, once the power passed, the train started to slow down and eventually stopped. This was for a roll-by inspection. The South Shore picks up cars just a little bit south of here in Stillwell, and so they have to let the conductor off and then push the entire train past him to make sure there's no faults with the cars they just picked up. It's quite inconvenient for the railroad, but lucky for me, because it means I get to get more shots of the units. And so I decided to do this creative low-angle shot as the two units rolled by in the other direction, which I'm very proud of. And with the inspection now done and the conductor back on board, the two Jeeps roared the train into life and continued on their way to their ultimate destination of Michigan City. And just a few days later, on November 3rd, I got wind that CSS 2010, the XL&I unit, would be trailing on the local that day, so I headed back to Stillwell to catch it. As you can tell by the lighting, it stayed in Stillwell for a long time switching, and it took forever for it to throttle up and pass me at the crossing, but it eventually did. Unfortunately, by that point, it was pretty dark. And unfortunately, this was the pre-Bright Bentley era, so I only had a small, tiny flashlight to illuminate the train. But I was standing so close, I think it did an okay job. Power was 2006 with the Indiana 115th birthday sticker leading, and of course 2010 was trailing. And of course, once again, the train rolled to a halt for the roll-by inspection. Unfortunately, this time it went back quite far, enough to reach the other crossing, and so I was able to nab 2 more shots of 2010 and 2006. And once again, on November 21st, me and my aunt ran into the South Shore unexpectedly at this random crossing in the middle of actual nowhere. But I was actually coming home from doing rail fanning on the Enna-Chicago line, so I had my camcorder and bright Bentley. And because of that, convinced my aunt to drive all the way to the lake crossing so I could get this shot of the train with bright Bentley now, which makes a massive difference. Power was 2000 leading and 2005 trailing, which was the only CSS Jeep I hadn't got on tape yet, so I was very happy with this. And only a few days later, I got word once again that the local was something interesting. A 3-unit lash-up, which I've never seen on the Kingsbury Branch before or since this, making this a very special catch. Since the fact that it had 3 units was the only special part, I wanted to get a farther away shot where you could see all 3 units, so I knew exactly what shot to go for. This across the field shot in Stillwell, which hasn't been possible for the longest time because of the cornfield, but now it was fall, so the corn was cut down and I could once again get the shot. And we finish off the South Shore with my trip on December 10th. I was simply curious on this day to see if the South Shore would be running, and when I headed down there and approached the crossing, I noticed the South Shore sitting at the switching tracks in Stillwell, with the crew seemingly making arrangements around it. Because of that and the fact that all three lights were on, I knew that it wouldn't be long before it moved, and eventually it did. And as it throttles up, we get to see just how poorly maintained these tracks here are from my new angle, which now gives a longer run-up shot of the South Shores. If you look closely at the units in the cars, you can see them wiggle from side to side on the poorly maintained track. But then again, this is a short line with only 3 trains per week at maximum, and they go slow, so it's not really that dangerous. And speaking of going slow, as the train got closer, I noticed it was going slower and slower and slower. I thought maybe it was slowing down for its inspection, but it usually passes the crossing before that happens. And I was even more confused when it rolled to a halt before even reaching the crossing. As the train stopped, I noticed the conductor was walking down the side. I thought that maybe he was just doing his inspection like this, which didn't really make sense in the snow, but as I watched carefully, I noticed that he was climbing onto each individual car and turning the handbrake on. It was at this point when I realized they were tying the train down here. I've seen them do this once before, but I didn't know they still did. And as the conductor walked up towards the units and passed me, he told me that they were stopping for a crew change. I was somewhat disappointed, and he could tell just from the look on my face, so he said, well, yeah, you can't get them moving, but you can now walk around them to get as many shots as you want from different angles. And so I took full advantage of his permission to grab as many shots as I could of these two Jeeps, 2005 and 2003, sitting here tied down at the crossing. I stepped all over the place, down into the field, even on the rails. But you know what? It's South Shore. The train stopped. I know for a fact nothing's going to be running because the train has stopped right here. Not to mention I got permission. I also use this as an opportunity to grab lots of roster shots. So you can see the mounted camera, light, and number boards on 2005. Here's a general view of the back of it, and as I walked around to the side, I got some more views of the side of the unit, and you can clearly see the weird running board with these small sections of reflective tape instead of the solid band you'd find on Class 1s and most other short lines. Here's a close-up of the South Shore Freight lettering on the side, which is nicely encircled in a band. Here's a view of the CSS reporting mark, number, and the Support Our Troops sticker, which I'm just now realizing is in the South Shore Keystone shape. As I walked down farther into the field, I got front-on shots of 2005, and eventually 2003 as I continued farther down. You can also see the remnants of trees that were cut down. The farmer along this section of the road cut down the trees that used to be here along the side of the South Shore, and you can see the remnants still rotting away. Anyways, as I continued to walk farther down, I got some nice close-up shots of 2003. Which included a general view, which I had to hold my camera up over the trees for, as well as a close-up of the cab, where you get a good look at all the details on it. After that, I started walking back towards the road and grabbed some more shots on the way, including this close-up shot of the front of the entire train, this absolutely awesome shot where I placed my camcorder on the rail and pointed up at the units, this front-on shot, which I'm going to call the death view shot, and of course, one of my ever-so-classic and beloved low angles, looking at the back of 2003 and the front of the whole train. As I continued to walk farther back towards the car, I got more pictures of the train from farther away, and eventually once I made it back to where it was parked by the other crossing, I got this view through the trees, which shows the nice signal here, and this final one last look at the South Shore, way down in the distance with the foggy atmosphere of rural winter Indiana in the background. And on that note, I'm going to finish this video. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to catch those units while you can. Haha! Nope! This video ain't over yet! I bet you were disappointed because you were like, wait. The title said there was going to be a JBC rail bonus in this video. And, yeah, here it is. On December 13th, me and my mom are running some errands in Westville, and the road that we had to take to get back just so happened to go right by the JBC Rails yard in Kingsbury Ordnance Plant. And so we decided to stop by on the way back to get some shots of the two JBC rail engines in the near whiteout conditions, assuming we could find them. We didn't take any pictures on the way in and just scouted the area to see if we could. We later turned around and headed back along the road, and then we got our shots of the two units. The first being JBC 3030 here, which is technically a TPLX Prairie Rail leasing unit, although it still wears the JBC name on the side since it's on long-term lease. This unit is a veterans unit and was stopped here just out kinda on the main line, although it was inside the fence. It was right next to this line for the Midwest warehousing section, which is what the JBC serves here, at least in this section. There's a lot of industries in other areas which they do serve, but this area is mostly just warehouses where things are stored, and sometimes they're transferred into rail cars to get out. I really like this shot here, which shows the near whiteout conditions. And just like the stopped South Shore, I went ahead and took the opportunity to get some shots of these unique spec work, including this horn mounted to the side of the cab, the numbers, which have a very interesting sort of Norfolk Southern style font, and of course a general view of the front of the cab and the wasp stripes on the front of the nose. However, there is a reason why this unit has Norfolk Southern style number boards, because it actually was a Norfolk Southern unit before. Now, unlike the South Shore Jeeps, which were all bought straight from EMD and have served their entire life on South Shore, the JBC units are leasers, and of course, if you know anything about leasers, you know that they often have crazy histories. And 3030 here, while it does have a history, is kinda lame in comparison to some leasers, which we'll be seeing very soon. It was simply built as Conrail GP38-2, number 3329, and eventually after the merger it was acquired by Norfolk Southern and became their number 3030, before being eventually sold to TPLX and repainted to this veteran scheme. However, it retained the number 3030. We then headed farther down and found the other Jeep, which is actually a GP35, which I know is rare in 2025. Either way, this unit is painted in the HLCX maroon, although just like 3030, it's owned by TPLX. However, just like 3030 again, it is on long-term lease to JBC here. But it actually has a crazy history of other railroads that have owned it, unlike 3030. It started out as PRR in 2057, which makes it the first unit I've ever seen to come from the standard railroad of the world. Then it became Penn Central 2057, then it became Conrail 2057, and then it was sold to an obscure short line in Washington, which was known as the Palouse River and Coulee City Railroad, with a reporting mark PCC. After a while of working there, it was sold to a leasing company for the first time, WAMX Leasing, but wasn't repainted. And after a long time serving under them, it was sold to TPLX, was repainted into this maroon, and initially it didn't have the stripes on the front, but after it started its long-term lease with JBC, it eventually did get them as a safety precaution, since it works in an industrial park. And with no more locos to photograph, my JBC visit and this ultra-long video are both over. For real. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to catch those units while you can, especially the GP35s, and I will see you in the next video.